Week 9 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 36 running backs. I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. What a season it's been for Taylor. 3 weeks in a row with 3 touchdowns in each ball game. And this week, even a tougher matchup at the Steelers. I think he goes out there once again and he'll have his way. Number 2, Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. Easily the worst game of the season. It was last week for CMC. I think this week he bounces back. This is a great matchup versus a defense that can't stop anyone. And we saw Saquon Barkley go out there for over 150 last week. So CMC, after a bad game, he's going to come out and have a big one this week. Number 3, Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. So Detroit coming off by Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously an explosive running back, one of the better backs in the league, and especially at home on that fast track. We saw it a few weeks ago, an easy 80-yard run he had for a touchdown. So this week versus Minnesota, division rival, I think this could be a high-scoring game. Number 4, Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens. So Lamar Jackson, he's back in the lineup. 2-5 is this Raven team. But the last couple weeks, Derrick Henry has ran the football well. And this week on Thursday night at Miami, a defense that can't stop anyone. I think Derrick Henry's going to have his way in this ball game. He's getting his second win now after he had a few bad games in a row and now building back up, especially last week. It was a good ball game for him versus the Bears. And I think we'll see more of the same in Miami. Number 5, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. So last week it was a bad game for Bijan and the offense as a whole. But this week they know they got to come out. They got to get things going early and often. And Bijan, just like McCaffrey, he's a running back we've seen so far in his NFL career. He's not going to have 2 bad games in a row. So even in a matchup at a good Patriot defense, I think Bijan bounces back in a big way. Number 6, James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. So last week he put on a masterclass with James Cook, over 200 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. Carolina couldn't stop him. But obviously this week a very tough matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs. But James Cook, another running back who's matchup proof, and it doesn't matter who he's going up against. But like I said, I just don't expect him obviously to go out there and have this insane game, but somewhere 100, 110 total yards and a touchdown definitely is a possibility. Number 7, Devon Achane of the Miami Dolphins. So one of the more underrated running backs in all fantasy football, I think Devon Achane is. And he's putting up 15, 20 points per week quietly as Devon Achane. He's a dual threat out of the backfield, could catch the football, running between the tackles. And this week, Thursday night, it's going to be a high-scoring game. Baltimore coming in, their defense has been banged up all season long, can't stop anyone. And I think Achane once again goes out there and puts up the numbers he does weekly. Number 8, Josh Jacobs of the Green Bay Packers. Jacobs, another steady back as well. And this week, a good matchup with Carolina coming in, where they just gave up over 200 yards rushing to James Cook and the Buffalo Bills. So Jacobs been a good back with this Green Bay Packer team. I know last week Green Bay had to come back. They threw the football a whole lot in that one to get the victory at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Emmanuel Wilson closed it out. But Jacobs, he should be fine and good to go in this one. Number 9, Javonte Williams of the Dallas Cowboys. So Javonte Williams, one of the best offseason signings, especially at the running back position for Dallas, to get him on a 1-year, $3 million deal. So this week, a good matchup versus Arizona. Last week, Javonte was the only bright spot for Dallas in the blowout loss at Denver, where he had 2 touchdowns versus former team. And this week on Monday night, I think he picks up where he left off last week. Number 10, Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. So Kyren Williams, it's been a solid year for him. The only thing is Blake Corum's been eating to the workload here and there with Kyren Williams. But this week, a good matchup versus New Orleans, a defense that can't stop anyone. And the Rams coming off a bye. This offense should be refreshed and ready to go. Number 11, DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. It's been a big year for Swift, especially the last 3 weeks, 15 or more fantasy points for DeAndre Swift. So a lot of people wrote off Swift over the last couple seasons, but he's been a steady RB2, worst case, every season since he's been in the NFL. So this week in a slam dunk matchup at the Cincinnati Bengals that just got gashed by Breece Hall in last week's game, I think Swift goes out there and he's an RB1 option for owners this week. Number 12, Chase Brown, staying in the same game of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Chase Brown, this whole offense has gotten back to where they were with Joe Burrow. I'm not saying exactly where they were, but in terms of putting up numbers and having good fantasy value. So Chicago's run defense isn't all that great. Saw Derrick Henry last week go out there and have a good game. And I think Chase Brown this week could go out there and be a solid option. 13, Ashton Jeanty the Las Vegas Raiders. It's been an up and down rookie season so far for Jeanty. We've seen a 3-touchdown game from him early in the season. Las Vegas, they're coming off by. It's a home game as well, and it's a good matchup versus Jaguar defense that really isn't that good. I know they cause turnovers, but they give up a lot of points. And running backs, for the most part, have had their way versus defense. I think Ginty, coming off the bye, could go out there and have a good game. 14, Kamini Vidal of the Los Angeles Chargers. So 2 out of the 3 games he's played in, Kamini Vidal with Hampton out, he's had over 100 yards and found the end zone in 2 of the 3 games. So this week, a great matchup at the Tennessee Titans, a defense that can't stop anyone. And this team, they could be up early in that second half and start running a lot like they did last week. 15, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Etienne, it's been an up and down season for him as well. But I think Jacksonville, they got to feed him the football more. Where they were off to a 4-1 start, Etienne was getting more work and making more plays. So this week, if they want to get this running game right and get back in the win column, this would be a good time to do it, feeding Etienne at the Vegas Raiders. 16, Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Jaylen Warren, it was a down game for him in last week's game, a tough matchup versus the Green Bay Packers. And also Kenneth Gainwell, we've seen get some carries as well here and there. But Warren, he's a 3-down back, physical back in between the tackles, good hands out of the backfield as well. And this week versus Indianapolis, where they know they got to put points on the board, is a Steeler team. I still think he's a top 16 option. 17, Bam Knight of the Arizona Cardinals. So maybe I'm higher on Knight than obviously consensus. But this week, I'm playing the matchup at the Dallas Cowboys, a defense that can't stop anyone, and pretty much Michael Carter, the only running back over there who's going to challenge Knight. But either way, Knight's locked in to the goal line role. He's locked in as well to the early down role in between the tackles, where Carter's more of a 3rd down back out of the backfield. And also Carter was released yesterday and then brought back on the practice squad today. So it's not a guarantee he'll be called back up, is Michael Carter, but I think he will, and he'll have a role. But Bam Knight, like I said, in a great matchup at the Cowboys, where they can't stop anyone, is a solid option this week. 18, Woody Marks of the Houston Texans. So Woody Marks, he's the running back you want to own over there, obviously in Houston. He's a dual threat out of the backfield. The only thing is touches haven't been great for Woody Marks. You want to see him get more to 15, 20 touch range, but Nick Chubb, more physical back, the bigger back, obviously in between the tackles, and he's still going to get his 10, 15 touches per game. But this week versus Denver, where this could be a grinded out game, and they know they got to put some points on the board, where Denver's offense the last 2 weeks has scored over 75 points in the 2 games combined. I think Marks could go out there and be an all-right option. 19, Tyrone Tracy of the New York Giants. So Tyrone Tracy, he's going to be the man now in the backfield for this Giant team. Cam Scatterbo, an ugly injury, obviously dislocating that ankle. Good to go from the start of next season at least. That's the only plus in a bad situation. So Tracy, last season, he was the running back over there for New York a majority of the year, and he had some good games. So this week versus the Niners, I think he's an all-right RB2 for owners. 20, J.K. Dobbins of the Denver Broncos. So J.K. Dobbins, it's been a solid season for him. Last week he got vultured a few times by R.J. Harvey in the red zone and at the goal line. And this week at Houston, a tougher matchup. The last 2 weeks have been easier matchups versus the Giants, and obviously versus the Dallas Cowboys. They can't stop anyone, where he went over 100 yards last week. So this week at Houston, I still think he's an all-right RB2. 21, Rico Dotto of the Carolina Panthers. So Dave Canales, head coach, said Dotto's going to get more touches now, and Chuba Hubbard's going to take a little bit of a back seat in this offense, and rightfully so. We saw Dotto a few weeks ago, 2 games in a row, over 200 yards on the ground in Week 5 and Week 6. So this week, a tougher matchup at the Packers, one of the better run defenses in the league. But like I said, now with more work for Dotto, he should be locked in as an RB2 for owners. 22, David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. So this week, it's very thin at running back. After the top 15 guys with the bye weeks and injuries throughout the league, there's a lot of handcuff guys or backup running backs that get some touches that are going to be on this list. So this week in a matchup versus Minnesota, coming off a bye, Montgomery obviously a big track record versus Viking team, where he started his career with the Bears, and now the last few seasons here with the Lions. I think he could go out there on a 10, 12 touch ball game and still put up some decent points. 23, Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. So Stevenson, he's the bell cow guy over there. I know Henderson last week had 10 carries, but he did have a fumble loss, and in the second half of that game, they ran away with that one where it was some garbage time. So Stevenson's the running back. This week, Atlanta's coming in. I know Atlanta got blown out last week, but I believe this could be a closer game for Atlanta than it was last week. And Stevenson could do a little bit of everything, even though his ceiling as well isn't that high. 24, Jordan Mason of the Minnesota Vikings. Aaron Jones returned to the lineup last week. Jordan Mason, he didn't do anything in that game with only 1.6 fantasy points in PPR leagues. But I still think Mason's the back you want in this backfield for Minnesota. He's going to get goal line work, early downs work as well sometimes, and he's even going to get his own series of drives as well, where we saw early in the season Mason was out touching Aaron Jones. But I still think this could be 50-50 split between the backs, but I'd rather have Mason. And this week at Detroit, it's an all-right matchup for him. 25, Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. Kamara, I think for other times catching up to him, unfortunately. The numbers haven't been great. Now Tyler Show in there, quarterback. He's going to start for this New Orleans Saints team, and we'll see what he could do. I know Spencer Rattler, he wasn't any good, but at least these guys were getting some fantasy points and putting up numbers. But this week in a tough matchup with the Rams, Kamara, yeah, he'll get volume, 15, 18 touches in this game, but we really haven't seen much out of him this season in the receiving game. 26, Zach Charbonnet of the Seattle Seahawks. So Charbonnet, he's the goal line back, and at times in between the tackles back, and that's why I got him ranked over Kenneth Walker, where Walker really hasn't done much of the season. So this week a matchup at Washington, where their run defense has been middle of the pack this season. I think Charbonnet could go out there and he could sneak in 12, 15 fantasy points as long as he get that goal line touchdown. 27, Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. So like I said, Kenneth Walker, he's a third down back, not getting tons of work early on, and this is a 50-50 split as well. But Kenneth Walker, if he's not hitting a home run type of run, obviously his fantasy value isn't going to be great for Kenneth Walker. And also as well, he's not catching a lot of passes to have great value week in and week out of the backfield. So with all those factors, he's a low-end 2 RB. 28, Aaron Jones of the Minnesota Vikings. So like I said, Jones returned to the lineup last week. They got the doors blown off. The Los Angeles Chargers losing that one 37-10. And now with J.J. McCarthy back in the lineup, I think they're going to look to run the football a little bit more and more dump-offs to the backs in Mason and Jones. But like I said, Jones, he took a backseat early in the season when he was healthy to Mason. And this week at Detroit, I could see him not putting up great numbers. 29, Bill Krosky-Merritt of the Washington Commanders. So Krosky-Merritt, he's not going to catch the football out of the backfield. And I don't think he's that great in between the tackles as Krosky-Merritt, but he's still the guy over there in Washington. This week, an all-right matchup with Seattle coming in. Aiden Daniels, he should be back in the lineup where he's going to practice, which is always a great sign. So Daniels coming back obviously boosts everyone up in this offense, obviously for this Commander team, but still Krosky-Merritt, even in the games with Daniels, besides one, he really hasn't done much. 30, Tajay Spears of the Tennessee Titans. So we know the Titans are going to be trailing all season long in these games, and Tajay Spears the better receiving back than Tony Pollard. And the thing with Pollard as well, if he's not scoring a touchdown, his receiving has been limited for the most part this season. So this week in a matchup with the Chargers coming in, one of the more high-powered offenses in the league, and obviously Tennessee chasing points, I think Spears will be the better back between the two, where obviously he's a better pass catcher out of the backfield than Tony Pollard at 31. He's going to have to run the football in between the tackles, obviously, where that's his job, where Spears, he's not really going to do that, and he's a touchdown-dependent back, so his upside isn't high. 32, Kareem Hunt, Kansas City Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco week to week with an MCL sprain, and I think Pacheco's going to be out in this ball game. They got a bye in week 10 is Kansas City. So Hunt, he's going to get the early down work and some goal line work in this ball game. But still, I think Rashard Smith, who's ranked number 33 on this list, is going to get obviously the pass catching work, and also he's more explosive in between the tackles is Rashard Smith, where he's got home run hitting ability as the former wide receiver. So like I said, Kareem Hunt, saw him score 2 touchdowns last week, but in between the tackles, he didn't look great. 4 yards per carry, nothing amazing last week was Kareem Hunt. But like I said, this is going to be a committee, and this is going to be a high-scoring game, I believe, with the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. So Kareem Hunt now, he's going to be the starter in this one, I would say. Rashard Smith obviously going to get more of a workload with Pacheco week to week now with the MCL sprain. 34, R.J. Harvey of the Denver Broncos. So R.J. Harvey, last week, a big game. It was for him, 3 touchdowns. But once again, his touches were limited in that game. J.K. Dobbins is the back over there, and Harvey's change of pace and occasional third down, passing downs back for this Denver Bronco team. And this week, a tougher matchup at the Houston Texans, where points are going to be way tougher than they were over the last 2 weeks versus the Giants and Cowboys to come. So like I said, Harvey, unlimited touches. You're not going to get touchdowns like we did last week, 35. Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. So like I said, Rico Dotto's going to get the touches now, more in the backfield. I think Chuba Hubbard's not totally going to be written out, but I think Chuba Hubbard, 8-12 touches and most we're going to see from him in this backfield. And this week in a tough matchup at the Packers, a solid run defense. I don't see much upside in Hubbard this week. In the 36 and final back, I'm ranking Kyle Monangai of the Chicago Bears. So his workload really hasn't been much. Is Kyle Monangai. DeAndre Swift's been one of the better backs over the last month of the season in terms of fantasy football. But this could be a game where the Bears, they just want to run it down Cincinnati's throat using both running backs. What we saw last week, Breece Hall and Isaiah Davis both had good games for the New York Jets, especially Hall went out there over 100 yards on the ground and scored 2 touchdowns. So that's a top 36 running backs I'm ranking for week 9 of the fantasy football season.